The Arizona sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, turning the desert into a furnace that could kill a man in hours. Thomas McKenna pulled his hat lower over his eyes and squinted at the horizon. He'd been tracking cattle rustlers for 3 days now, following their trail deeper into Apache territory than any sensible man should go. His horse snorted and shook its head, foam gathering round the bit. Even the animal knew they were pushing too hard in this heat. Thomas reached for his canteen and allowed himself one small sip. Water was more precious than gold out here, and he still had miles to cover before sunset. The trail led him down into a dried creek bed that snaked between Red Canyon walls. Once, this had been a rushing stream. Now it was just cracked earth and bleached stones. Thomas dismounted to study the tracks more carefully. The rustlers had stopped here, probably hoping to find water. What they found instead was something that made Thomas's blood run cold. Boot prints, lots of them, and something else. Moccasin tracks, much smaller and lighter. His stomach twisted as he read the story written in the dust. The rustlers hadn't just stopped for water. They'd run into someone who wore Apache footwear. Thomas followed the mixed tracks around a bend in the creek bed. What he saw next made him forget about the rustlers entirely. A young woman lay crumpled against the bank, so still, she might have been dead. Her long black hair spread across the sand like spilled ink. Blood had dried dark on her buckskin dress, and flies buzzed around the wound in her shoulder. Thomas's experienced eye could see she'd been shot, probably trying to run. For a moment, he froze. Every instinct screamed at him to mount up and ride away. Apache and white settlers were at war in this territory. If her people found him here, they'd assume he was the one who shot her. They'd kill him slowly, and he'd deserve it by their thinking. But she was breathing. Barely, but breathing. Thomas had seen enough death in his years as a cavalry scout. He'd seen what bullets did to human bodies, what the desert did to anyone foolish enough to challenge it without water. This woman was maybe 2 hours from dying, and she couldn't be more than 20 years old. He couldn't just ride away. Thomas tied his horse in the shade of an overhang and approached carefully. The woman didn't stir when his shadow fell across her face. Up close, he could see she wasn't just any tribal member. Her dress was decorated with intricate beadwork that would have taken months to complete. Silver bracelets caught the light on her wrists, and a necklace of turquoise and coral lay tangled in her hair. Whoever she was important to her. People. The bullet had passed through her shoulder, missing the major arteries but tearing muscle and causing massive blood loss. Thomas had treated similar wounds during the war. He knew what to do, but he also knew how dangerous this was. Every minute he spent here increased his chances of being found. He did it anyway. From his saddlebags, Thomas pulled out his medical kit, a habit from his army days that had saved lives more than once. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, with precious water from his canteen, then packed it with clean cloth. The woman moaned softly but didn't wake. The desert sun was merciless, turning her skin hot to the touch. Thomas knew she needed shade and more water than he could spare, but he gave it to her anyway. Using his bedroll and some dead branches, he rigged up a lean-to shelter. Then he carefully moved her into the shade. She was lighter than he'd expected, probably weakened by blood loss and dehydration. As he settled her on his blanket, she stirred for the first time. Dark eyes fluttered open, unfocused with pain and confusion. When she saw his face, pale, bearded, obviously white, those eyes went wide with terror. She tried to pull away, but she was too weak. A sound escaped her throat, not quite a scream, but close. "Easy," Thomas said quietly, holding up both hands. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." She probably didn't understand the words, but his tone seemed to calm her slightly. Thomas had learned a few Apache phrases during his time in the territory, mostly practical things for dealing with scouts and translators. He tried one now, his pronunciation probably terrible. "Shima," he said, hoping he was saying sister correctly. Help, I help. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, but she stopped trying to move away. Those dark eyes studied his face, looking for some sign of his intentions. Thomas moved slowly, showing her the medical supplies, the water, the clean bandages. Over the next hour, he worked to stabilize her condition. The wound needed proper cleaning and fresh dressing. She flinched when he touched her shoulder, but she didn't cry out. Thomas found himself impressed by her courage. He'd seen grown soldiers make more noise over smaller injuries. As the afternoon wore on, Thomas kept checking the horizon for dust clouds that might mean riders approaching. Apache warriors looking for their missing woman, or the rustlers coming back to finish what they'd started. Either one could mean death for him, but he couldn't abandon her now. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness as he worked. During her lucid moments, she watched him with those intelligent dark eyes. Thomas tried to appear as non-threatening as possible, speaking softly and moving slowly. He shared water with her, drop by drop, and was relieved when she managed to swallow. By evening, her fever had broken slightly. Thomas had used most of his water and medical supplies, but her breathing was stronger. She was young and healthy. If infection didn't set in, she might actually survive. As darkness fell, Thomas built a small, smokeless fire, using dry wood that wouldn't give away their position. The desert grew cold at night, and he knew she needed warmth. He also knew this was the most dangerous time. Firelight could be seen for miles, but without it, she might not make it through the night. The woman was awake now, propped against his saddle. She hadn't spoken, but she'd accepted water, and even managed a few bites of hardtack softened with water. Thomas sat across the fire from her, cleaning his rifle and keeping watch. "My name's Thomas," he said quietly, not expecting her to understand, but wanting to break the silence. "Thomas McKenna. I used to be a soldier, but that was a long time ago." She tilted her head slightly, listening to his voice, if not his words. "Found you this afternoon," he continued. "Somebody shot you and left you for dead. Wasn't me, if you're wondering. Probably those rustlers I was tracking. They're not good men." The fire crackled between them. Thomas kept talking, partly to stay alert, and partly because she seemed calmer when he spoke. "I know your people and mine don't get along," he said. "Can't say I blame you for that. Seen what some settlers do, what some soldiers do. It's not right." She was watching him intently now, and Thomas got the strange feeling she understood more than she let on. "But I couldn't leave you there," he finished. "Wouldn't be able to sleep at night, knowing I could have helped and didn't." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she placed her hand over her heart and nodded once. Thomas didn't need to speak Apache to understand that gesture. She was saying thank you. They sat in comfortable silence after that, both keeping watch in their own way. Thomas scanned the darkness for threats, while she seemed to listen to sounds he couldn't hear. The desert was full of dangers, wild animals, hostile men, and the unforgiving environment itself. As the night deepened, Thomas found himself wondering who she was. The quality of her clothing and jewelry suggested she was someone important. In her tribe, a chief's daughter, maybe, or a medicine woman. Either way, helping her was either the best decision he'd ever made, or the worst. Time would tell which. Dawn broke over the desert with colors that painted the sky like fire. Thomas had dozed fitfully through the night, jerking awake at every sound. The woman had slept better than he'd expected, her breathing steady and strong. When she opened her eyes that morning, they were clearer than they'd been the day before. She tried to sit up straighter and winced. Thomas was at her side in an instant, steadying her with a gentle hand on her good arm. She looked at him with surprise, as if she'd forgotten he was there. Then her expression grew wary again. "Take it easy," Thomas said softly. "That shoulder's going to hurt for a while." She didn't understand his words, but his tone seemed to reassure her. She studied his face in the morning light, taking in details she'd missed in her fevered state the night before. Thomas felt oddly self-conscious under that intense gaze. After a moment, she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, speaking in Apache. Thomas caught only a few words he recognized, but her tone sounded like a question. "I don't understand much Apache," he admitted. "Wish I did." She tilted her head, considering. Then she pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Ayana. She repeated it, then pointed at him with raised eyebrows. "Ayana," Thomas repeated carefully. Her face lit up when he got it right. "That's your name." She nodded, then waited expectantly. "Thomas," he said, pointing to himself. "Thomas McKenna." "Tomas," she said, the unfamiliar sounds rolling off her tongue differently than his pronunciation. He smiled. "Close enough." Over the next hour, they established a basic way to communicate. Ayana knew more English than she'd initially let on, though she spoke it hesitantly. Thomas discovered she'd learned some from traders and missionaries who'd visited her people. Her English was broken, but understandable. "You, soldier?" she asked, eyeing his worn cavalry boots and the way he carried himself. "Was," Thomas admitted. "Long time ago. Don't fight anymore." She nodded slowly. "Why, you help me? Your people? My people?" She made a gesture with her hands like two things, pushing against each other. It was Thomas's turn to consider his words carefully. "Because you needed help," he said finally. "Didn't matter who you were." Ayana's eyes searched his face, as if looking for deception. "Many white men would not." "I'm not many white men," Thomas replied quietly. As the morning progressed, Thomas helped her drink more water and eat some of his rations. She was stronger today, able to sit up on her own for longer periods. While she rested, Thomas scouted their surroundings and tended to his horse. When he returned, Ayana was examining the bandage on her shoulder with interest. She looked up at him and said something in Apache, then switched to English. "You know healing." "Learned in the army," Thomas explained. "Seen a lot of bullet wounds." She nodded thoughtfully. "I know healing too. My grandmother teach me plants, medicines." She gestured toward the desert around them. "Many plants here help sick people. You're a medicine woman. Learning to be," she said with a hint of pride. "When I finish learning, I help my people stay healthy." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. If she was training to be a medicine woman, she was even more important to her tribe than he'd thought. Her death would have been a significant loss to her people. "What were you doing out here alone?" he asked. Ayana's expression darkened. "Looking for ghost flower. Special plant that grows only in certain places. Needed for ceremony." She touched her wounded shoulder gingerly. "Found by bad men instead." "The rustlers," Thomas said grimly. "They're the ones who shot you." She nodded. 3 men on horses. I try to hide, but they see me. They chase, shoot." Her voice grew quiet. "They laugh when I fall." Thomas felt anger burn in his chest. He'd seen enough senseless violence to last several lifetimes. But something about the idea of grown men hunting down a young woman for sport made his blood boil. "They're long gone by now," he said, more to himself than to her. "You were following them," Ayana observed. "It wasn't a question. They stole cattle from a ranch near Tucson. I was hired to track them down, but you stopped to help me instead." Thomas met her eyes. "Cattle can be replaced. You can't." Something shifted in Ayana's expression at those words. She studied him with new intensity, as if seeing him for the first time. "In my tribe," she said slowly, "we believe Great Spirit guides all things. Maybe Great Spirit send you to find me." "Maybe," Thomas said, though he'd never been much for religious thinking. "Lucky timing, anyway." "Not luck," Ayana said firmly. "Purpose." They spent the rest of the morning getting to know each other better. Thomas learned that Ayana was the daughter of Chief Running Bear, leader of a Chiricahua Apache band that moved seasonally through this part of Arizona. She was 19 years old and had been training as a medicine woman since childhood. In return, Thomas shared pieces of his own story. He'd grown up in Missouri, joined the cavalry at 18, and spent 5 years fighting in various conflicts across the Southwest. He'd left the army after witnessing too much bloodshed, and now worked as a scout and occasional translator for the territorial government. "You speak our language?" Ayanna asked with interest. "A little. Not well," Thomas admitted. "Learned from Apache scouts who worked with the army. Good men, most of them." Ayanna seemed surprised by this. "Apache worked with army?" "Some do. They help track hostile bands, guide patrols through difficult country." Thomas could see she was troubled by this information. "Your people aren't all of one mind about the white settlers, are they?" "No," she said quietly. "Some want peace. Some want to fight until all whites leave our lands. Some think we should learn new ways to survive." She looked at her hands. "It divides families sometimes. What do you think?" Ayanna was quiet for a long time. "I think the old ways are dying," she said finally. "More whites come every year. We cannot fight them all. But I do not want my people to lose who we are." Thomas nodded. He'd seen what happened to tribes that were forced onto reservations, seen proud warriors reduced to begging for government rations. It wasn't a pretty sight. "Maybe there's a middle way," he suggested, "keeping what matters most while adapting to what can't be changed." Maybe Ayanna agreed, but it is hard to know what is right path when so many voices speak different words. As the day wore on, Thomas found himself genuinely enjoying their conversation. Ayanna was intelligent and thoughtful, asking questions about the world beyond Apache territory. She wanted to know about cities, about how white people lived, about the machines and inventions she'd heard described but never seen. In return, she told him about Apache customs, about the ceremonies and beliefs that guided her people's lives. She explained the significance of the ghost flower she'd been seeking, how certain plants were believed to carry messages from the spirit world. "My people believe all living things have spirits," she explained. "Rocks, trees, animals, people, all connected, all part of one great circle." "Sounds peaceful," Thomas said. "Can be," Ayanna replied, "but also dangerous when someone breaks the circle, hurts the balance." By afternoon, it was clear that Ayanna was recovering well. Her fever was completely gone, and she could move her arm without severe pain. Thomas knew they couldn't stay in the creek bed much longer. Someone would come looking for her soon, and when they did, finding her with a white man would lead to assumptions that could get them both killed. "Your people will be searching for you," he said. Ayanna nodded. "When I do not return, they will send warriors to find me. Then we need to get you somewhere safe, where they can find you," Thomas said. "Without finding me." But Ayanna shook her head. "Cannot leave you alone in desert. Apache country is dangerous for white men traveling alone." "I've been traveling alone in Apache country for years," Thomas pointed out. "Not like this," she said firmly. "Not after helping Chief's daughter. If my people find sign that white man was with me, they will hunt until they find you. Better if I tell them myself what happened." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "That sounds like a quick way to get me killed." Ayanna's eyes met his steadily. "Trust me," she said simply. The journey back to Apache territory took longer than Thomas expected. Ayanna was recovering well, but she still couldn't travel for more than a few hours at a time without rest. They moved carefully through the desert, avoiding main trails and staying in areas with natural cover. Thomas had given Ayanna his spare shirt to wear over her torn dress, and she'd braided her long hair back in a practical style. To anyone watching from a distance, they might look like a settler and his wife traveling together. Up close, though, there was no hiding what they were, two people from different worlds who had no business being together. On their second day of travel, they took shelter during the hottest part of the afternoon in a small canyon with a natural spring. Thomas watered the horses, while Ayana examined the plants growing near the water source. She moved with the careful attention of someone who saw medicine in every leaf and root. "This is good," she said, holding up a small plant with silvery leaves. "Help wounds heal faster." Thomas watched as she prepared the plant, crushing the leaves between two stones and mixing them with a little water to make a paste. Her movements were precise, practiced. This wasn't just knowledge she'd memorized, it was skill passed down through generations. "Your grandmother taught you all this?" he asked. Ayana nodded, carefully applying the plant mixture to her shoulder. Wound. She was greatest medicine woman in our band. People came from other tribes to learn from her. Pride filled her voice, then sadness. "She died 2 winters ago." "I'm sorry," Thomas said, and meant it. "She told me before she died that I would face a great test," Ayana continued. "Said the spirits would send someone to help me learn my true path." She looked at him meaningfully. "Maybe that someone is you." Thomas felt uncomfortable with the idea that he might be part of some spiritual plan. "I just helped because you needed help. Don't think there was anything mystical about it." But Ayana shook her head. "You do not understand Apache ways. When someone saves another's life, under certain conditions, it creates sacred bond. The spirits decide who lives and who dies. They chose to save me, through you." "What kind of conditions?" Thomas asked, curious despite himself. Ayana counted on her fingers. "Full moon, yes. Was full moon when you found me. Blood spilled, yes. I was wounded. Great danger, to the one who helps, yes. You risked your life to save Apache woman, in Apache territory. And the helper must act from pure heart, not for reward." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "I told you, I just couldn't leave someone to die." "Exactly," Ayana said softly. "Pure heart." They traveled on, following game trails and dry creek beds that led generally toward the mountains where Ayana's people made their winter camp. With each mile, Thomas felt the weight of what lay ahead. He'd been in dangerous situations before, but walking voluntarily into an Apache camp with the chief's daughter was like jumping off a cliff and hoping someone had put water at the bottom. But something had changed between them during their time together. Thomas found himself looking forward to their conversations, watching for her smile when he mispronounced Apache words, feeling protective when she showed signs of fatigue from her injury. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she certainly was. It was something deeper, a connection he'd never experienced with anyone before. Ayana seemed to feel it too. She caught him looking at her sometimes, and would meet his eyes with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was warmth there, and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. On their 3rd evening, they made camp in a sheltered valley where ancient Apache pictographs decorated the canyon walls. Ayana studied the old drawings by firelight, translating some of the symbols for Thomas. "This one tells story of great hunt," she said, pointing to figures of men and buffalo. "This one speaks of marriage ceremony between tribes." "How old are they?" Thomas asked. "Very old. My grandfather's grandfather might have seen them made." She traced one symbol with her finger. "This one is interesting." Thomas moved closer to see what she was indicating. It was a simple drawing, 2 figures, standing together, one clearly Apache, the other dressed like a white man. "What does it mean?" he asked. Ayana was quiet for a long moment. "It tells of prophecy," she said finally. "2 peoples becoming one through sacred bond. Old stories say it will happen when times are darkest, when our people need bridge between worlds." "You think that's what this is?" Thomas asked quietly. "What's happening between us?" Ayana turned to face him fully. In the firelight, her eyes seemed to hold depths he could spend a lifetime exploring. "I have dreams," she said. "Every night since you found me, I dream of walking between 2 worlds, carrying messages of peace. In the dreams, you are always with me." Thomas felt something shift inside his chest, like a door opening that he'd kept locked for years. Ayana, She placed her finger gently on his lips. In Apache belief, when two people are bound by sacred circumstances, their spirits recognize each other. We call it soul-seeing. Have you felt this? Thomas nodded slowly. He had felt it, a recognition that went beyond physical attraction, beyond even friendship. It was as if some part of him had been waiting his whole life for her without knowing. Yes, he whispered. Then you understand why I cannot let you face my people alone, she said. We are connected now, by laws older than either of our peoples. What happens to you, happens to me. The next morning brought danger in the form of dust clouds on the horizon. Thomas spotted them first, 3 riders moving fast across the desert floor. From their direction and speed, it was clear they were searching for something. Apache? Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer from the way Ayana had gone tense beside him. My brother Stone Wolf, she said, shading her eyes against the sun. And 2 other warriors. Thomas felt his mouth go dry. They don't look happy. They have been tracking us for days, Ayana said. Stone Wolf is, protective, and quick to anger. The riders were getting closer. Thomas could make out details now. Painted faces, weapons ready, horses lathered with sweat from hard riding. These weren't men in a mood for conversation. Maybe I should go, Thomas said. Lead them away from you, give you time to reach your people safely. No, Ayana's voice was firm. That would only make them more suspicious. We face this together. The Apache warriors thundered into their camp with war cries that echoed off the canyon walls. They surrounded Thomas and Ayana with weapons drawn, their horses dancing nervously in the confined space. Stone Wolf was clearly the leader, a young man about Thomas's age, with fierce eyes and intricate tattoos covering his arms. When he saw his sister standing next to a white man, his face went dark with rage. He spoke rapidly in Apache, his voice harsh and demanding. Thomas couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. Stone Wolf wanted explanations, and he wanted them now. Ayana answered calmly, speaking in measured tones that seemed designed to cool her brother's anger rather than inflame it. She gestured to her wounded shoulder, to Thomas, to the medical supplies still visible among their gear. Stone Wolf's expression shifted from rage to confusion as he listened to her story. The other 2 warriors looked equally puzzled. Finally, Stone Wolf turned his attention to Thomas directly, speaking in broken English. You, white man, why you with my sister? Thomas had faced hostile enemies before, but something about this felt different, more personal. She was dying, he said simply. I helped her. White men shoot Apache women, Stone Wolf spat, not save them. I'm not those white men, Thomas replied, keeping his voice steady. Stone Wolf studied him for a long moment, then turned back to his sister. They spoke in rapid Apache for several minutes, their conversation growing increasingly heated. Thomas caught a few words he recognized, including what sounded like his name and something about sacred laws. Finally, Ayana seemed to win the argument. Stone Wolf sat back on his horse, his expression still hostile, but no longer murderous. He said something to the other warriors, who reluctantly lowered their weapons. My brother says you will come with us to our camp, Ayana told Thomas. Chief Running Bear will decide what to do with you, and if I refuse? Stone Wolf apparently understood enough English to answer that question himself. He drew his knife and tested the edge against his thumb. I guess I'm going to meet your father, Thomas said to Ayana. She nodded solemnly. Remember what I told you about sacred bonds? It may be the only thing that saves your life. As they prepared to leave with the warriors, Thomas caught Ayana's hand briefly. No matter what happens, he said quietly, I want you to know, these have been the best days of my life. Her fingers squeezed his gently. For me also, she whispered. Trust in the spirits, Thomas. Trust in what we have found together. The Apache warriors formed up around them, and they began the journey toward what Thomas knew might be his last destination. But as he rode beside Ayanna, watching her face in the morning sun, he found that he wasn't afraid. Whatever the spirits had planned for them, they would face it together. The Apache camp sprawled across a hidden valley like a natural part of the landscape. Dozens of traditional dwellings blended into the terrain so perfectly that Thomas might have ridden past without noticing them. Smoke from cooking fires drifted up between the buildings, and the sounds of daily life, children playing, women talking, dogs barking, created a peaceful atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tension. Thomas felt all of that peace shattered the moment they rode into view. People stopped what they were doing to stare at the impossible sight of a white man riding alongside Chief Running Bear's daughter. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. Warriors reached for weapons. The very air seemed to crackle with danger. Stone Wolf led them straight to the center of the camp, where a large ceremonial area surrounded a fire pit. Word of their arrival had already spread, and people were gathering from all directions. Thomas had never felt so many hostile eyes focused on him at once. Chief Running Bear emerged from the largest dwelling, and Thomas understood immediately where Ayanna got her dignity and presence. The chief was a man in his 50s, tall and powerfully built, with silver threading through his black hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. His face was carved from stone as he took in the scene before him. Behind him came an elderly man whose bent back and deeply lined face spoke of great age. This had to be Wise Crow, the medicine man Ayanna had mentioned. He moved slowly, but with purpose, leaning on a walking stick decorated with feathers and carved symbols. Ayanna dismounted carefully, favoring her wounded shoulder. She walked directly to her father and began speaking in rapid Apache, gesturing to Thomas and touching her bandaged injury. The crowd listened in tense silence as she told her story. Thomas remained on his horse, unsure whether dismounting would be seen as respectful or threatening. Stone Wolf and the other warriors kept their weapons ready, watching for any sudden movement. Chief Running Bear's expression grew darker as he listened to his daughter's account. When she finished, he turned his attention to Thomas with eyes like winter storms. "Get down," the chief said, in accented but clear English. "We will speak." Thomas dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. He handed his horse's reins to Stone Wolf, who snatched them with obvious disgust. "You are the white man who claims to have saved my daughter," Chief Running Bear said. "It wasn't a question. I found her wounded and helped her," Thomas replied simply. Any decent person would have done the same. A murmur went through the crowd at his words. Some sounded angry, others surprised. "Decent?" The chief's voice was sharp. "White men shoot Apache women for sport. White men take our children to far places where they forget their own people. White men promise peace and bring soldiers. You speak of decent?" Thomas felt the weight of generations of broken promises and violence in those words. He couldn't deny the truth of what the chief said, but he also couldn't accept responsibility for crimes he hadn't committed. "Some white men have done terrible things," Thomas said carefully, "just as some Apache warriors have killed innocent settlers. But I judge each person by their own actions, not by the actions of others who share their skin color." Chief Running Bear studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to Wise Crow and spoke in Apache. The old medicine man nodded and shuffled closer to Thomas, examining him with eyes that seemed to look right through him. Wise Crow circled Thomas slowly, occasionally stopping to peer at him from different angles. He muttered under his breath in Apache, sometimes nodding, sometimes shaking his head. Finally, he returned to Chief Running Bear and spoke in low tones. "Wise Crow says you carry no evil spirit," the chief announced. "But that does not mean we trust you." Ayanna stepped forward and spoke to her father again, her voice passionate and urgent. Thomas caught fragments words that sounded like sacred and spirits, and what might have been his name, Chief Running Bear listened to his daughter with the patience of a man accustomed to weighing difficult decisions. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring at the ground as if reading messages in the dust. "My daughter speaks of sacred bonds," he said finally. "She claims the spirits sent you to save her life, that ancient laws protect you." He raised his eyes to meet Thomas's gaze. "But laws must be tested. Truth must be proven." A chill ran down Thomas's spine. "What kind of test?" "3 trials," Chief Running Bear announced, his voice carrying clearly across the camp. "You will prove your respect for Apache ways. You will prove your courage in combat. You will prove your commitment to my daughter and her people goes deeper than words." The crowd murmured with excitement. Thomas glanced at Ayanna and saw fear in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. "And if I fail these tests?" Thomas asked. Chief Running Bear's expression didn't change. "Then you will die, and we will know the spirits did not truly send you." "Father, no," Ayanna protested, but the chief silenced her with a gesture. "This is the only way," he said firmly. "If this man truly has sacred bond with you, the spirits will protect him. If not," he shrugged. Wise Crow stepped forward and spoke in his creaky voice. Chief Running Bear translated. "Wise Crow says the trials will begin at sunrise tomorrow. Tonight, you will be kept under guard. You may speak with my daughter, but you may not leave this camp." Several warriors surrounded Thomas, not threatening but clearly ready to act if he tried anything foolish. They escorted him to a small hut at the edge of the camp and gestured for him to enter. The interior was simple but comfortable: a sleeping mat, water jar, and some dried food. Thomas sat on the mat and tried to process what had just happened. He was going to face 3 trials that would determine whether he lived or died, and he had no idea what they would involve. A few minutes later, Ayanna appeared in the doorway. The guard stepped back to give them some privacy, but remained close enough to intervene if necessary. "I am sorry," she said quietly, settling beside him on the mat. "I hoped my father would listen to reason." "He is listening to reason," Thomas replied. "From his perspective, anyway. I'm a stranger from a people who've brought nothing but trouble to his tribe. Of course, he wants to test me." Ayanna touched his hand gently. "These trials, they will not be easy. Tell me what to expect." She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "The first trial is about respect. You must show that you understand and honor our ways, not just pretend to accept them. Wise Crow will ask you questions about Apache beliefs and customs. But it is not just about knowing the right answers. It is about showing that you truly respect our people as equals." Thomas nodded. "I can do that. What about the second trial?" "Combat," Ayanna said reluctantly. "You must fight one of our warriors. Usually, she hesitated. "Usually, it would be to the death." Thomas felt his stomach clench. "Usually," I spoke to my father privately. "I convinced him that killing you would break the sacred bond and anger the spirits. So the combat will be until first blood, or until one fighter yields." "Who will I fight?" Ayanna's expression grew pained. "My brother Stonewolf has claimed that right. He blames you for the danger I was in. He thinks if you had not been in Apache territory, those bad men would not have been there either." Thomas understood. In Stonewolf's mind, his very presence had led to his sister being shot. It wasn't logical, but grief and anger rarely were. "And the third trial?" he asked. "That one I do not know," Ayanna admitted. "My father and Wise Crow will decide after they see how you do in the first 2 trials. But Thomas, She gripped his hand tighter. "The third trial is always the hardest. It tests not just your body or your mind, but your spirit, your willingness to sacrifice everything for what you claim to believe in." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun set outside their small prison. Thomas found himself oddly calm, despite the danger he faced. Maybe it was Ayanna's presence beside him. Or maybe it was simply acceptance that some things were beyond his control. Are you afraid? Ayana asked softly. Thomas considered the question honestly, of dying, a little, of failing you, much more. She leaned against his shoulder, careful of her injury. The spirits brought us together for a reason, she said. I must believe they will see us through this. Even if they don't, Thomas said quietly, I want you to know that meeting you changed something in me. Made me believe that maybe there's more to life than just surviving from one day to the next. Ayana lifted her head to look at him. You will not die tomorrow, she said firmly. I have seen it in my dreams. Good dreams, I hope. She smiled for the first time since they'd arrived at the camp. Very good dreams. Dreams of us walking together, through many years, helping our peoples find peace with each other. I like the sound of that, Thomas said, then added more seriously, but first I have to survive tomorrow. You will, Ayana said with quiet confidence. Because you have something. Most men do not. What's that? A pure heart, she replied. And that is worth more than strength, or skill, or knowledge. That is what the spirits truly test for. Outside their hut, Thomas could hear the sounds of the camp settling down for the night. Tomorrow would bring trials that could end his life. But tonight he was here with the woman who had changed everything for him. It would have to be enough. Dawn came too quickly for Thomas's liking. He'd slept fitfully, waking often to the sound of guards moving around his hut. Each time consciousness returned, reality hit him fresh. Today, he would face trials that could end his life, or change it forever. Ayana arrived with the sunrise, carrying a bowl of water and clean cloth. Her face was pale, but determined as she helped him wash and prepare for what lay ahead. Remember, she said quietly as she worked, the first trial is about showing respect, not just proving knowledge. Wise Crow will know if your words come from your heart, or just your head. Thomas nodded, trying to calm the nervous energy building in his chest. And the combat trial. Do not try to hurt Stonewolf badly, she warned. Show skill and courage, but also mercy. My people value a warrior who knows when to fight and when to show restraint. Before Thomas could ask more questions, the guards appeared at the doorway. It was time. The entire tribe had gathered in the ceremonial area. Men, women, and children formed a large circle around the central fire pit where Chief, Running Bear, and Wise Crow waited. The morning air buzzed with anticipation and tension. Thomas walked to the center with as much dignity as he could manage, very aware that every eye was upon him. Chief Running Bear stood and raised his hand for silence. We begin the trials, he announced in both Apache and English. First, this man will show his respect for our ways. Wise Crow shuffled forward, his ancient eyes bright with intelligence, despite his age. He spoke in Apache, and Chief Running Bear translated. Wise Crow asks, what do you know of the Apache understanding of life and death? Thomas had expected questions about customs or ceremonies. This went deeper. He thought carefully before answering. I know that Apache people believe all living things have spirits, he said slowly. That when someone dies, their spirit joins with the Great Spirit, but also remains connected to their people. Death is not an ending, but a change from one form of existence to another. Wise Crow nodded slightly and asked another question through the chief. Why do Apache warriors sometimes take great risks to recover the bodies of fallen comrades? Because leaving a warrior's body for enemies to dishonor would trap his spirit in shame, Thomas replied. The proper ceremonies must be performed so the spirit can find peace and continue to protect the tribe. Several people in the crowd murmured approval, but Wise Crow wasn't finished. His next question came without translation, spoken directly. In Apache. Thomas understood enough to know he was being asked about the relationship between humans and nature. He answered in his broken Apache, trying to convey that he understood how. Apache people saw themselves as part of the natural world, rather than separate from it. Wise Crow smiled for the first time and spoke to Chief Running Bear. The chief looked, surprised by whatever the old medicine man had said. Wise Crow says your words carry truth, Chief Running Bear announced. You have passed the first trial. Relief flooded through Thomas, but he knew the hardest parts were still ahead. Stone Wolf stepped into the circle, carrying a wooden war club and a leather shield. His face was painted for battle, and anger burned in his eyes like hot coals. He tossed a similar club and shield at Thomas's feet. Second trial, Chief Running Bear called out. Combat until first blood or surrender. Thomas picked up the weapons, testing their weight and balance. The club was heavier than he'd expected, carved from hardwood and designed to deliver devastating blows. Stone Wolf was younger than Thomas and had been training with these weapons his entire life. They circled each other warily while the crowd cheered and called out encouragement to Stone Wolf. Thomas tried to read his opponent's movements, looking for patterns or weaknesses. Stone Wolf attacked first, rushing forward with a series of powerful overhead strikes that Thomas barely managed to block with his shield. The impact sent shockwaves up his arm, and he realized quickly that trying to match Stone Wolf's strength would be a losing strategy. Instead, Thomas used his cavalry training and longer reach to keep his distance, making Stone Wolf come to him. He landed a few light blows on Stone Wolf's shield and managed to avoid the worst of his opponent's attacks. But he was clearly being outmatched. That the crowd sensed it too. Their cheers grew louder as Stone Wolf pressed his advantage, driving Thomas back step by step around the circle. Then Stone Wolf made a mistake. Frustrated by Thomas's defensive tactics, he overcommitted to a massive swing that left him off balance. Thomas stepped aside and could have easily struck Stone Wolf's exposed back with enough force to break ribs. Instead, he hesitated. In that moment of mercy, Stone Wolf recovered and spun around with a backhanded strike that caught Thomas across the shoulder, drawing first blood. The crowd erupted in celebration, but their cheers died as they saw what happened next. Stone Wolf, expecting Thomas to yield, had dropped his guard. Thomas could have struck him down while he celebrated, but instead, he stepped back and lowered his club. I yield, Thomas said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Stone Wolf stared at him in confusion. You ... yield. After drawing first blood. You won fairly, Thomas replied, and I have no desire to harm my future brother-in-law. The words hung in the air like smoke from the sacred fire. Stone Wolf's expression shifted from anger to something Thomas couldn't quite read. Slowly, he lowered his own weapon. You could have struck me when I was unguarded, Stone Wolf said quietly. Yes, why did you not? Thomas met his eyes steadily, because winning isn't always about defeating your opponent. Sometimes it's about showing them respect. Stone Wolf studied Thomas for a long moment, then turned to his father. They spoke in rapid Apache while the crowd waited in tense silence. Finally, Chief Running Bear nodded and stepped forward. Stone Wolf says you fought with honor and showed mercy when you could have shown cruelty. You have passed the second trial. Thomas felt his knees go weak with relief, but Wise Crow was already shuffling toward the center of the circle. The third trial was about to begin. The old medicine man spoke at length in Apache, gesturing to the sky and the earth and the sacred fire. When he finished, Chief Running Bear's face was grave. The third trial tests your commitment, the chief said. Wise Crow has seen in his dreams that dark times are coming for our people. White settlers grow more numerous each season. The government promises peace, but sends soldiers. Our young men speak of war that cannot be won. Thomas listened with growing understanding of where this was leading. If you truly wish to become part of this tribe through marriage to my daughter, you must choose. Chief Running Bear continued. You can return to your people and live safely among them while Apaches suffer and die. Or you can stay here and face whatever fate comes to us, even if it means death. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the children had stopped fidgeting. But there is more, the chief added. If you choose to stay, you must also choose to become a bridge between our peoples. You must use your knowledge of both worlds to help prevent the war that is coming. This may require you to make enemies among your own people. You may be called traitor by whites and forever be caught between two worlds that do not fully accept you. Thomas looked around the circle at all the faces watching him. He saw hope and fear and uncertainty. These people were asking him to stake his entire future on a love that had grown from 3 days in the desert. His eyes found Ayanna in the crowd. She was watching him with tears streaming down her face, but her expression was proud and loving. She had never asked him to make this choice, had never demanded this sacrifice. She would have understood if he walked away, but Thomas knew he couldn't walk away. Not from her, not from the chance to build something better than the hatred and violence that had defined relations between their peoples for too long. I choose to stay, he said clearly. I choose to become Apache, and I choose to spend my life working for peace between our peoples, no matter what the cost. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then Wise Crow began to chant, and the sound seemed to release something in the crowd. People began to smile and nod. Even Stone Wolf looked pleased. Chief Running Bear stepped forward and placed his hands on Thomas's shoulders. Then you are welcome in our tribe, and welcome to marry my daughter. Wise Crow will perform the ceremony when the moon is full again. Ayanna broke from the crowd and ran to Thomas, throwing her arms around him despite her injured shoulder. The tribe erupted in celebration, with singing and drumming that could probably be heard for miles. You chose to stay, she whispered against his ear. I chose you, Thomas replied. Everything else follows from that. 3 months later, Thomas and Ayanna stood before the tribal fire as Wise Crow bound their hands with sacred cord and spoke the words that made them husband and wife, according to Apache law. Thomas had taken the name, He Who Saves Life, and Ayanna had become his partner in every sense. They built a small trading post at the edge of Apache territory, a place where both peoples could come to trade goods and, gradually, to trade understanding. Thomas used his connections with the territorial government to negotiate fair agreements. While Ayanna's medicine skills helped people from both cultures, their children would grow up speaking both languages, understanding both worlds, carrying forward the message that love could overcome even the deepest divisions. But that night,